Welcome back to another episode of the Flipside. So when we started this podcast, I knew I needed to line up some guests, and Todd, you were top of mind. We got Todd Helzer. I always want to say Helsner.
Helsner. No, it's
Helzer.
Helzer. Top 5? Top 10? What number?
Oh man, top of mind. I was like, this guy, your journey, which I want to get into, man, it's inspiring, it's incredible, and a lot of people talk the talk but don't actually carry through with action, and I think you're an awesome example of what it looks like to put that action into existence. And so,
Thanks,
so who are you? How'd you get here? Where'd you come from?
So
your backstory.
I'm married to a wonderful wife named Amy, and I've got 2 boys. So we have lived here now for 15 years. Actually, maybe it's longer. I don't know. You lose track of time after a while. But originally from Colorado, and grew up out there. Was in the ministry. Did a lot of work there. Came out here. Did a lot of ministry at a local nonprofit here. And then eventually just kind of felt the tug/interest pull me into real estate. And so actually one of the deals we worked on kind of helped fund that jump from my W-2 to full-time real estate, and been doing that, I guess, now almost 2 years.
Awesome. What type of real estate? In what capacity?
Yeah, so my 9 to 5, I always like to say it, is helping people buy and sell real estate. We do a good bit of investment properties. And then I am an investor on the side as well, or that's like half my job is being an investor. So I'm always looking for buy and holds for our own portfolio to build that. And then I've done a few flips here and there, and always looking for a good deal. So if you know anybody, you know.
Right, yeah.
If you don't buy them,
you know any good deals? Yeah. No, I love that. So Todd, we have a mutual friend who introduced us, and at the time you were working for the church that he goes to, I think his wife works at, and we had the sit-down meeting, right? And we've talked about this on the podcast. Alex and I have talked about it a lot, where, always have that sit-down meeting. I think you do this now when people reach out to you wanting to get into real estate in some capacity. And it's, you give them the first meeting, give them some homework, and then, maybe they come back, maybe they don't. And you were, out of over 300 plus meetings I've had like that, you're one of 2 people who have ever come back, and I think you actually were like, I've already done all of that.
And here's
here's where, and I was like, holy cow, like this, because like that separated you from 300 plus people of you're serious, like you're taking it serious, you're treating it like a job in a business and not like a side hobby that doesn't take any time, but you want a bunch of mailbox money. So okay, this guy's serious, he's different. So, and which encouraged me a little bit more than others to kind of put time into, like, man, I want to see this guy grow. And man, I don't regret that at all, because the growth you've had over, you just mentioned before we went live, 2 years, which I can't believe it's been 2 years. I think that's awesome. I want to walk through that journey and what it looked like going from that meeting at Wild Roast Coffee into where you are now. But so kind of walk me through what that looked like on your end.
Yeah, so I think it was between, and I do appreciate it. Thanks so much for taking the time to meet with me. And, it was you and Rob that sat down for coffees, and I didn't know how to find off-market properties. I didn't know how to, find a deal, you know what I'm saying? Because you run these numbers, you jump on Bigger Pockets or whatever, and you're like, okay, I've got these rental calculators. And you run the deal, and you're like, this deal off of MLS is not a deal. It doesn't work. So what do I do? And so I was talking to you about it. I was talking to Rob, and you're like, well, you got to find like a true deal, which is an off-market thing. So I quickly learned about off-market acquisitions, how to look for them, how to find them, built that kind of out, and was doing that on the side in addition to just my regular work. And I also had a side photography business, so I was really running, like, at the time, 3 businesses. But I knew I wanted to transition out of the W-2, and it had been a great season to be there at working at the church, but I knew that I needed something different for our family and also for me. And so really, really pressed hard. It was kind of a season of a lot of work, and quickly drummed up a lot of leads and kind of worked through those leads and some properties, one we worked on together. And all of that kind of created the momentum to basically make the jump because, effectively, I had a family, like if you're a single guy or a girl and you don't have a family, you don't have no, like, even boyfriend, girlfriend, I'm like, take all the risk in the world because there's no responsibility, right? But when you have people who are counting on you to provide, roof over their heads and food on the table and support and love and affection, all the things that a family needs to be healthy, that takes effort and energy, and that's your number one priority. And so everything else has to take a back seat. And so what I've always said is, the timeline that it takes to accomplish your goals is often underestimated. And when you have some of those extra things on your plate, you just got to plan out a longer timeline. And so I took from starting to work on basically saying, yes, I want to move into a new career, to actually saying, like, putting in my 2 weeks notice took me 2 years. And that was preparation. That was learning the new trade. That was finding off-market deals that ended up funding the money to make the jump and have some extra, liquid cash to. So it was no small journey.
Right. Yeah.
And everybody else was like, it was funny. I was putting my 2 weeks notice into my boss, and he's like, well, what are you going to do? Real estate? And he was like blown away because he had no idea, because I was just quietly doing this on the side, just hustling. And so eventually we were able to make that jump to find. But
Yeah.
it took 2 years. It was a long time.
I think that's such an important point to hammer on is, all of the work that it took to actually even get to quitting a full-time job, right? Yeah. And it's, the perception from the outside of people who don't really know what you were doing was immediately, oh, he just jumped into real estate and now he's killing it. I can do that too. I'm quitting my job tomorrow. It's like, wait, don't do that. Don't do that. Because it is. Yeah. I mean, literal years of preparation to get ready to take that jump. And like you said, it's a little bit easier if you don't have the responsibility of family and kids and all that. But it's still a big deal because it takes that deal flow timeline just to get one, right? And hopefully it succeeds, and hopefully it gives you enough money to last a couple months while you find another one or you quit that job. So I think that's huge. I think that's big to handle.
Yeah. There is actually a book that was kind of affected some of it. I was already heading that way of like, hey, I need to create some income. But John Acuff has a book called Quitter. And basically that's the synopsis of the book is hang on to the opportunities that help you sustain the ability to do the side hustle longer, because then it will help you when you actually make the jump to have success. So people just, I think, make transitions too quickly and they don't prepare enough. We're very emotional people, and it's a knee-jerk reaction to be like, I'm feeling this tension. I don't want to be at my job. I don't want to move on to the next step, or I want to move on to the next step. Let's do it now. Instead of saying, pause, you just felt those feelings, now go prepare. Find a plan, execute. Yeah, and it takes time. Yeah, it takes a lot of time.
It absolutely does. But you're very good at having those goals laid out, surrounding yourself with. We'll talk about the mastermind in a second, but just surrounding yourself with people who, throughout your team on the real estate side, that encourage you and help build you. And I think that's super important. Yeah. And obviously has been very successful. So, so before we get into that, give me a snapshot of like where you're at now. You're basically 4 years in. Right, 2 years full time and 2 years prep. So what does it look like today from a business standpoint?
Yeah, so really the day to day is, like I said, helping people buy and sell. At any given time, we'll have anywhere from, I do listings primarily, and I would say 80% of our stuff is more investor. But at any given time, I'll have anywhere from 10 to 30 listings. It just varies widely. So helping people get through those processes, I love that part because it helps. I really get to hone my negotiation skills and learn about all kinds of nuances of contracts and different, financing situations. And then, the great thing about talking with other investors is I'm still relatively new to the game. And so it's amazing to be able to talk to those who are more experienced and have done things that I haven't done. And it allows me to really learn. So every call I get on with a client who's maybe selling one of their, properties, I'm actually trying to learn from them because they're probably 2 or 3 steps, or even if they aren't, you probably still can learn something from someone. So I love that part of my job. And then looking, like I said, always trying to look for off-market deals, or from other realtors or other people you hear about for either putting it in our portfolio buy and hold, or flipping and stuff like that. So that's kind of a good part of my job. And then there's part of my job that's just maintenance of what we currently have. So right now I've got a property up in Gardendale that I'm trying to get rented. And I manage some of my own stuff, and then I have a property manager for some of the other stuff. This one I personally manage. And finding a tenant is literally the hardest part of the process, finding a good tenant.
And most important, right?
And the most important, too. Yeah. So in that process now, and trying to vet people, and making the right call rather than just you want to rent this place, you want to give me money. It's like, hold on, they may not be qualified.
Right.
So that's a good part of my day as well, is making sure those things are moving. And then it's just kind of three parts. That's my day to day.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I learned that the hard way of finding a good tenant that either makes or breaks the deal. Right. And I think you're good at going through and vetting that, but also coaching your clients out of, hey, I'm going to sell you this investment property, but also don't just throw the first person that's got money in there, right? That's
100%.
It can absolutely wreck the deal.
Yeah, I remember listening to a podcast. I can't even remember the podcast, but it was basically like landlord podcast, right? Mm-hmm. And every single horror story that came on there was due to the lack of vetting the tenant on the 100%.
Yeah.
It was like, this thing turned bad, this person was doing this, drugs out of the place, blah, blah, blah. All the things came from, well, were you involved in the process, or did you have, I just kind of hired this random person to get this property and never really checked up on it.
Yeah. Like, so having someone ask you those questions, which I love, having a community that you've created through our Thursday morning mastermind is getting, because it's super easy to blame the tenant in that situation, or blame that's not in my control, or it's not my fault. Right, but you've got one, the accountability, and two, kind of the extreme ownership mindset of, no, this is my fault. It may have been my fault 2 years ago when I stuck them in my property, but this is my fault. And
even with the property manager. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Because you hired the property manager, and then they're finding a tenant for you. Well, if you still don't ask the right questions, is it Section 8 or is it not? Or what type of classifications do they have? Like, when they come to me and say, we've approved a tenant, I ask for a little bit of a rundown. And then ultimately, I take ultimate responsibility, because I hired the property manager, and I'm in charge of them. They're doing a service for me. And if they don't find the right tenant, and something goes kaput, it's ultimately still my
gotta manage the
responsibility.
manager, right?
You got to manage the manager.
Yeah, so. I love it. Well, cool. So what's the ultimate goal? Do you love the idea and want to continue on building the real estate sales side as well as the investment, single family, or what direction were you headed?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think I'm still learning and figuring it out. I think, my eventual goal would be to, we currently have a lot of B class and C class stuff in our portfolio. And so the goal would be to really class those up over time, dispose some of them and go into a higher A class long term. I've heard it explained like a chess. And you have your queens, your pawns, everybody in between. And your properties are kind of like that. Sometimes you sacrifice a pawn for a queen, So a good example of that is, I had a flip. I actually had a buy and hold property this spring that I wanted to keep, but I had a potential deal coming up for a lot of a portfolio deal, which I'm still working on. We'll see if it pans out.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in a minute too.
But all that to say is, in order to be in a position to acquire that, I actually needed to sell this property to get the funds from it, so to put me in a better cash position. So I sacrificed that pawn, or even you could call it a rook. It was a pretty good property for the potential queen of buying a bunch of properties, or properties that I may keep long term. There's a couple townhomes in there that I could see having and things. So all that to say is, I do see myself pushing more into the investor side down the road, maybe 10, 15 years, being almost full-time investor and less realtor. But I'm enjoying the journey right now and loving it. And like I said, I gained so much knowledge and information and deals. I bought deals off of clients. I've bought deals from other realtors. So it keeps me in a space, and that's why I moved to it. It keeps me in a space where the activity's happening. So I don't know. Maybe I'll always be, in the realtor space, but
I bet you always will be. Rob and you have done a really good job of putting yourself in the position of being like the investor agents of Birmingham. And I've said for 10 years plus, being like looking on Bigger Pockets and Birmingham popping up on the map of being like a new hot spot of people.
Yeah.
There's really, before y'all kind of jumped into that space, there was no agent that was, hey, I'm the guy. Let me be your boots on the ground if you're out of state wanting to invest here.
Yeah.
And even if you're here. And I always saw opportunity there, but never geared my business towards that way because it's a lot of work, right? It is a lot of work, and you're usually dealing with lower priced homes. If you've got the volume and y'all have built out systems to handle that volume, then you can succeed, obviously, very, very well.
Yeah.
And so I think y'all have done a good job capturing that market and that title, basically, of the investor realtor of Birmingham. And you've got the deals, you've got the, you can put it all together. So y'all have done a good job on that.
Thanks, man.
But I think that will always tie back to you being in sales. It's in some capacity, just because you establish, like, you're the guy.
Yeah.
And so the calls aren't going to stop.
I enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. And I, sometimes, because the work is hard. It's sometimes not hard. There's the weird thing of like, you have this opportunity to choose your days, and so I feel very, very, very grateful for that. But at the same time, it's like I step back from it all and I'm like, golly, like I'm so grateful to the Lord and to ultimately just, I don't know. I just, sometimes when it is tough, I step back and just have to be filled with gratitude because the opportunities at my fingertips are mind blowing. And we definitely live in the top 5% of the world, like in opportunities and wealth, in the things that we have at our fingertips for our kids. It was funny, my son the other day, so they have this school, like you find out your teacher, you find out your classmates, all this. So yesterday that happened, and my son comes home, and he's 9 years old, going in 4th grade, and he is just so sad. And I'm like, what's going on? And he's, well, I just don't know about my teacher. I've heard, mixed reviews.
From 5th graders?
Yeah, from 5th graders. And, I just don't know my classmates, all this kind of stuff. And I said, son, I realize it's probably not optimal. It's probably not optimal, but, those feelings are real. But you need to step back and realize that you have such an amazing, like if you took 100 kids and lined them up, you would be in the top five kids. You pull those kids out. You have more opportunity, more connections, better teaching, better resources than those other 95 kids. And I realize everything's not perfect. Never, everything in life will never be that way. But you got to realize what opportunity you have at your fingertips. I mean, he goes to Edgewood. Yeah. I mean, it's one of the top schools in the state, you know. And so, anyway, I just, all to say, a lot of times when things are hard or whatever, I like to step back and just say, like,
take that initial reaction out for a second and think about the whole big picture.
Yeah.
Well, and really, and then framing the mindset around, okay, this is a new opportunity with new teachers, new people, new classmates, right? And how am I going to approach it, right?
Yeah.
And, that doesn't go away. It's funny, that applies to literally a 4th grader, and it applies to how we view opportunity and what's in front of us as adults in a working
100%.
industry, right?
Yeah, I'm telling him that, and I'm like probably preaching to myself more than anything.
Okay, I need to go meditate for a minute. Hold on. That's funny. Jumping back, I've never heard the chessboard analogy you just said. That was really cool. I like that. It kind of reminds me of, I heard someone talking about every property being like a little oil well, like a little oil pump.
Yeah.
And it's going, but you can say like, okay, well, I've got to shut this one down so I can go get these other 10 going. Yeah. Right. And I kind of like that analogy of, it's not hands off. You're not passive, but you got to go maintain your oil. Is that what it's called? An oil well?
Yeah. Oil rig.
Oil rig. That's what I'm thinking of. Oil rig. You got to maintain it, right? You got to make sure that it's working smoothly, but it sits there and just constantly pumps oil while you're sleeping, while you're hanging out with kids, while you're mountain biking.
It's a great analogy.
Yeah, so I stole it from somebody. That's not mine. But,
yeah, so did the chess thing.
But if I call it an oil well, I guess that is mine, right? And don't know what that is.
You rebrand it.
Yeah, rebrand it. Yeah. That's All right, so switching gears a little bit. So I want people who have talked about getting in real estate but haven't made the jump. What are some of, I'm putting you on the spot so you can think about it for a second, but what are some of the surprises, good and bad, that you've experienced or maybe did experience that first year getting in that you did not really anticipate?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think some of the things that really were a big surprise was the highs are really high and the lows are really low. And so when you work for someone, which is a great thing, it's totally fine. But ultimately, you are not the ultimate person. Like when you own a business, it all at the end of the day falls on you. And so when things go really well, you have this euphoria of success and like I'm top of the world and everything's great. You feel that. You feel that really, really high. But when you're an employee, you feel like, yeah, I'm excited. I think this day went well, or we got this contract or whatever. But like ultimately, you still are not the ultimate benefactor of that high.
Yeah.
So you don't feel it like they do. And the same thing if say a truck burns down or a truck breaks down and that owner has to pay for it. So when I get a call that a tree has fallen on one of my properties, I feel it a lot more than the property manager who gets the call that, because I'm the owner. And so that was one of the things that took me aback, that I've had to grow a thicker skin of realizing that when the lows come, because those are the hardest ones, and we often focus on negative, we're just naturally that way as human beings. When those lows come, you just have to accept that that is part of the game and to get yourself back into a mental state of winning and a mental state of trying again and mental state of like recalibrating, because, we're all emotional people. I'm probably more emotional than not. That was what took me a little bit of time to really to work on, was those hard days were really, really hard. And the recovery process from like, okay, tree fell down, write a big old check for $6,500, let's move on. And I didn't have to do that in my previous work life, but now I do. And so that was one of the things that definitely took me back. And then just the value of, you always hear about the value of networking, but how crucial really has become for my business and just sometimes too just mental health, because a lot of what I do is alone and in deals or driving properties, so really just valuing those relationships, networking. So part of why I started our mastermind group and just different things like that, so community built in after the jump was really, really important.
Yeah, that emotional control, right? Because there's a lot more that's coming at you as a business owner and kind of independent contractor. We've talked about the coaching program, Strategic Coach, that I started up last year, that I'm still not quite a year into, but every single thing they do, every workbook we have, every call, everything starts with the positive focus. Period. And it's like, what's gone well this week?
That's
right?
good.
And that's what you started a mastermind. There's in between 4 and 8 of us there every single week, every Thursday morning. And that's how we start. It's like, what was the win for the week? And and that kind of jumps back to what you just said, is if you can reframe your mindset or start with the positive focus and then go from there, it just puts you in a mindset of abundance, of gratitude. And when you start that way, any conversation or any day, then it's going to be a better day. Because you're there to serve others and not serve yourself. And I think that's a good way to be. So with that, the positive focus, starting that way. So what's going well?
What is going well? Man, that's a great question. So I've been working on this portfolio deal, and we've talked about it a lot, probably to the point where you're sick of it. I talk about it in the mastermind group. I talk about it with everybody. Just, it's a big deal. It's probably the biggest deal I've worked on. And there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of responsibility.
Without giving specifics, do you want to give like size?
Yeah, I mean it's it's a bunch of single family homes, a little bit of commercial units, like over 10 doors, well over 10 doors, type of size, and the acquisition is probably double what I've ever done in money size and stuff. So a lot of responsibility, and I've literally lost sleep nights over trying to work this deal. And I'm finally we kind of worked on some stuff, figured out where things were at. But the biggest thing was I was wrestling with, how to basically work the deal, and I just came to a place where I basically just gave numbers to the guy, and I feel about it. So all that to say is that is a win, because whether I get the deal or not, I don't wrestle with it anymore, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so bigger picture, like scope back, and why I say that is every deal has that moment. Everything you're working on. And I would say even like with relationships. And I think there's this internal thing that when we're wrestling with something and truly have good intent to make something great, truly have intent to make something work, and we're wrestling with it, I think there's something that just clicks and say, yep, it's going to be okay. Or, yep, that's the right move, or whatever. And until I get that, I typically don't move forward. And so that was what was so hard about this one is, like I said, it may fall apart. I actually think it will fall apart, completely fall apart. But I'm okay with that because I wrestled with it. I've wrestled with this deal internally for over 4 months. And sometimes big deals take 4 months just on the front end of finances and, underwriting and all that kind of stuff. But internally, I could not get to a place where I was like, I'm okay with pulling the trigger on this. And why not? And it seems like the numbers are good. And so all that to say is that has been a really, really good shift being 4 months. I wouldn't say anxiety, but definitely tough, like hard nights, sleepless nights, trying to figure it out, reworking the deal, feeling really down about it, feeling frustrated, feeling like super excited about it, all the things.
A lot of emotion into it.
So I think that's been going really well. And then I'm just kind of in a season of, I've sold a few flips. And so I'm just back into a season of looking for another one, but just kind of recalibrating. And I'm not, since I started this 2-year transition of full time, I've always had a side project like a flip or a rehab for a rental. And that takes extra time away from the family and all that kind of stuff. So I'm kind of really soaking in. I'm still looking for the next opportunity, but I'm also soaking in that, the kids had the summer off. And maybe that was God's way of, kind of just giving me a window too, because I've really spent since I sold that last flip, really the last 2 months, a little more downtime with family. And
because I imagine once you buy this 10+ deal, if you do, it's all hands on deck, right? I mean, it's not turnkey, right? There's stuff to do.
Yeah, so, there's some extras to manage and figure out.
So enjoy the peace a little bit, right?
There's always something to do. That's an actually interesting thing, and I know that you're a podcast, but I'd like to ask you a question.
Yeah, come on, I love it.
So how have you? Because you're probably another 8 years in me as far as just being an entrepreneur.
10 or 11 total.
Yeah, total. So you're definitely ahead of me. You have a lot more reps in. How do you deal with the pressure of that constant, because there's always something if you have a W-2, that's kind of true too. There's always projects of the house, or maybe you have a side hustle. But in your position, there's literally, you could always promote your business more. You could always look for another off-market property. You could always look for another buy and hold. There's always another conversation. Someone else wants to, and you have a kiddo now, so, and they're cute, but they take a lot of time.
Yeah.
So how do you kind of balance that and kind of come to terms with that?
Man, such a good question. How do I balance the desire, the feeling that I always need to be doing something as an entrepreneur and a business owner, but also having to balance family and friends and everything else that comes along with life? And that's tough. For a very, very long time, I struggled with that, and I still do daily. But I think the biggest thing is being proactive on scheduling and time blocking and sticking to it, and just knowing in this time period, whatever it is, whether it's a full Saturday or 2 to 3 o'clock on a Wednesday, is my brain is off of real estate and I'm doing something else. And it's penciled into my calendar, and that's it. And there's no change. It doesn't matter if I get a call from, whoever about doing a deal, I'm busy that time. And just having that mental commitment of it's just switched off has helped a ton. Because I used to not schedule near as much as I did, and I would just be running crazy all the time. It would never turn off, and I could not be present. You've heard the phrase, when you're in the room, be in the room. I was in 12 rooms at once.
God, that's good.
And it was just so hard for me. So having and tracking, having our KPIs and what is my input, what is my unique ability, we've talked about a little bit, and what are those tasks that drive my business forward in each component, and making sure that when I'm working on let's say a flip, that I know there's 3 things in that flip that need my attention, or they're the highest and best use of my time, and then tracking and making sure that when I block out, I'm working on the flip from 3 to 4, it's getting done. And it's measured, it's done, and it's good, and nothing else is distracting me from those exact 3 items. And so being proactive instead of reactive to a lot of those opportunities and a lot of events is what has helped me a ton. By no means am I close to perfect at it, but that's helped organize my brain. Because I'm pretty scatterbrained, and it takes some very focused intention to try to not just sit there and be in 12 rooms at once.
Yeah, that's good. I love that. Yeah.
Easier said than done.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I like what you said about the time blocking. I've been trying to do something very unsuccessfly, shall I say. But that is good to hear that helps. So I'll just continue on that.
Yeah, my goal every Monday morning. So before I sit down with my real estate team from 8:30 to 9:30 every Monday morning. I get in the office usually by 7, get some business reading done, and then for about the next hour, the goal is no white space on my calendar. And it's filled up with Wednesdays from 2 to 3, I have piano lessons, right? It's filled up with, after that is time with family, and then we have small group. So Wednesday really from 1 on, it's family time. Yeah. And that color's yellow in my calendar.
But it's still filled.
It's filled. So there's no white space. So there's no I have nothing planned, right? If I golf, it's in my calendar.
Right.
And so everything's planned out to where there's really because that was my problem is there would be white space and it's like, well, what do I do?
Right.
And immediately my brain goes to, I've got a million things I have to do. And so it's really hard to balance that. But, I don't have any one thing that I need to be somewhere. So I'd naturally just be at home. And then, Rachel's talking to me or Stella's climbing on me, but I'm not there.
Yeah.
And so no white space was the goal. Again, not great at it. If you look at my calendar now, there's probably white space on it. But every Monday morning, that's what I try to do. And so when I've got people calling me, lenders call twice a day. Let's get coffee. I just moved to town. It's call me next Monday between 7 and 8.
Yeah.
And I'll see if there's room on my calendar. But if you call me anytime after 8 a.m. Monday morning, it's not happening that week.
Yeah.
Because my week's already booked.
So hack is if you want to go golfing with Blake, you call him Monday morning between 7
or
and
just
8.
say, you call me Tuesday and say, hey, have you golfed yet this week? Because I know it's on your calendar. Yeah.
That's awesome. How is the golf game going?
Oh, it's terrible. It's so bad. I really haven't played. It has not been on my calendar for a number of weeks, and kind of intentionally because I've been golfing much less this probably quarter or really I golfed a bunch at the beginning of the year, but because it's 4 or 5 hours of the day, and it's times, especially with having a kid now and number 2's on the way, we've got it's just hard to take 5 hours of something that's just me.
Oh yeah.
And that feels a little selfish.
Well, you are quickly approaching. Well, you are in it actually, and I can say this from a father. It's funny we're like different life places. Like you're further in entrepreneur life, but I'm further in the fatherhood life.
I need all the dad advice.
And you are in one of the greatest, but also most time-consuming parts of film. And there's so many great, rewarding things about it. My son, my youngest, we're done, and my youngest is almost 5. And it is night and day difference of what it used to be in the diapers, the feeding, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. I mean, I'm still making food for him. I made breakfast this morning before I came here, but just know that like it's a really really sweet time, but you are in a very time consuming. So it is probably good that you find hobbies that are more like an hour rather than 5.
Well, and Rachel jokes my hobby is getting hobbies because there's always
me too.
It's the entrepreneurial, it's the ADD like shiny object syndrome of I went mountain biking once, now I have to have a mountain bike. Let me get it.
Bro, we are wired the
right?
same.
And it's like, okay, I'll spend way too much on a mountain bike. I love to golf. Let's go get a new golf kit. And it's like, hey, here's a car. Let's go fix it up. So way too many hobbies and trying to tone. So the ones that take like golf takes, 5-hour time block. I really try to reserve that for clients, like taking them out or just like every now and then like a group of that. For a while, I was just, hey, let me go walk down by myself. And it was a good time to, you need that alone thinking time every now and then, but not twice a week.
Yeah, you could do it like Ryan Panetta. He charges. I mean, he's like an entrepreneur, like guru. He's got like 7-8 businesses, so people want.
Yeah.
So he charges, I think, it's upwards of $10,000 for a game of golf.
Really?
But you go golf with him, and you literally get 4 hours of his time while he does something he loves doing.
Yeah.
And you get to ask him all the questions about your business and talk through it, and he gives you ideas. And
that's so smart.
Yeah.
So next lender that asks me for coffee, I'm just gonna say, no, let's go mountain biking.
Yeah.
And give me $100.
Give me $100. Oh man, that's funny.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. Closing thing. So you mentioned one book earlier in the podcast. I think it was called Quitter.
Quitter, yeah.
Quitter. Yeah. That I like that one. That's really awesome. Do you have any other book recommendations or ones that really elevated your career?
Yeah, there's one, and frustrating because I'm blitzing the name. But this is really bad because I'm blitzing the name. Maybe you can put it in the show notes. But
You can tell me later.
effectively, the premise of the book, Josh Wetskin, and I'm probably saying it wrong, but he's a chess like grandmaster, and it's his story. And he goes through the process of realizing that he's ultimately just a really good at learning things. And so obviously he's a brilliant guy because you don't become a chessman. But then he goes on to actually become a jiu-jitsu, I believe it's jiu-jitsu, master.
Wow.
So two very different forms of competition,
Yeah.
but he mastered both, and he kind of, the art of learning. That's what it is.
Okay.
The art of learning. And so the art of learning, and the synopsis of the book is he was like, I'm not a really great chess player. I'm not a really great jiu-jitsu. I'm really great at learning and breaking down the processes of learning and learning at a high level. So how to get the extra like 10% of performance out of yourself. And so now he coaches people and all that, but a lot of his processes and a lot of his thinking is in that book. One of my favorite stories in that book was when he was about 6 weeks out from a big jiu-jitsu competition, and he broke his dominant arm, his right arm, and which it's like competition over.
Probably need that.
Yeah.
Right.
And he decides, he's like, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and continue to train. So he got it all splinted up or cast. And then he proceeded to do two things. So he trained his non-dominant arm. So he was still doing as much physical activities and retraining himself to still do activities, his weak side. And then the second thing he did is he would mentally exercise his right arm. And so he had it in the cast for 6 weeks, leading right up to, they pull the cast off. There was no atrophy in his arm. And he was so good now on his weak side that his competitors were getting dominant. I mean, he won the comp because they weren't aware that he had been training on his weak side for 6 weeks. And the big moral of the story is in every difficulty, there's an opportunity. And we can say, like, he could have thrown up his arms, the one good arm.
One of them.
The one good arm. And he could have said, you know what, it's done. I'm not doing the competition. Or you can look for opportunities in the struggle. And it's something I always try to do. It's very hard to do, especially when things come hitting and really hard things happen. But in every single negative thing that happened, an opportunity to grow. And if we reframe that, then we can truly become, like, elevate to another level.
I love that. So the art of learning.
The art of learning is incredible book. Incredible. It's one of those books you could literally read once a year and get something new out of it. Yeah. Which is actually, I need to, because it's up on my list.
Yeah, that reminds me. I heard it. Gary Keller's The One Thing.
Yeah.
I heard someone take that to the extreme and just say, all right, I'm only reading one book for a year. And just rinse, repeat, rinse. So it sounds like that book could be good to just, the second you finish, just go back to page
just
one.
Internalize
just go right back, yeah.
Yeah, that is an interesting thing. They say it takes 3 to 5 times to internalize a book sometimes. So when it has content like that, The One Thing would be another great one to literally just rinse and repeat, internalize it. I did, when I was kind of in the process of this career transition, and I call it reigniting my spirit, because sometimes we get in a place in our lives where we fall into the norms and we just kind of let it, just the mundane. We just kind of keep on, waking up, doing the same thing, and it kills our spirit. And so I was in the process of reigniting my spirit. And there was this Zig Ziglar, motivational talk. And I was inspired by it. I listened to it once, and it rung a few chords. And I was like, this is what I'm doing for the year. And I literally just listened to it over and over and over and again, and got new things out of it each time. And was it perfect? Do I believe in everything he says? No, but at the end of the day, it was internalizing those messages. Yeah. It takes time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, cool. Well, where can people find out more about you if they want to?
Yeah, so just at Todd Helzer, TODDHELZER, Z like zebra.
Not Helzer.
Helzer, not Helzer with an S. Just at Todd Helzer is my Instagram, and then I'm out. You pretty much can connect to everything else if you can.
All the socials.
All the socials.
Got a podcast.
got a podcast we just started, Cash Flow Bros.
Nice.
That's
I
what we
didn't
call
know the name.
it.
That's
So,
awesome.
we've got a couple episodes out, we will next week, and so excited about that. That podcast is basically just trying to. We are all three of us on it are investors, and so the goal is just to share stories that are locally happening that affects other investors, so good and bad of the economy and different things like that, and then just share stories that we've had successes in deal structure and successes with dealing with tenants and different stuff, and then also hard things, explaining why we believe there's certain areas we like to invest in, there's certain areas we don't like to invest in, there's certain price points we believe in and other price points we don't, and the reasons behind that hopefully will be apparent once we share stories and kind of stuff like that. So I think we'll interview some people. We're still trying to figure it out. So
I love it. That's so good. So anyone out there looking to get into real estate, not only reach out to you, listen to your story, but listen to the podcast, gives you market updates, where to go, where to put your money. I love it. Cool. Todd, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, man. This was a lot of fun.
Until next time.
All right.